Hello, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. I know the words global takeover sound pretty wild to some people, but let me show you something. This is a TV interview. This is Mike Wallace. This is Aldous Huxley, the guy who wrote Brave New World. And listen to what they say at the beginning of the broadcast.
This is Aldous Huxley, a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. A searing social critic, Mr. Huxley, 27 years ago, wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us.
He made that statement in 1958. 1958. Okay, now let me go and, I've got this video is on my website if you want to watch the entire interview. It's under the videos and it's also under breaking news, I believe. Okay, let me take you, I've updated my website and I want to just show you what I put up there. Okay, let's start with this. At the very top, I've put the U.S. military above top secret plans that are so secret that under these extraordinary plans, devolution could circumvent the normal Constitution, which means suspend the Constitution for the government succession, and military commanders could be placed in control around America. That's from Newsweek magazine. Okay, I'll get to the global takeover part here in a minute. National emergency. The president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel in a variety of ways, control the lives of United States citizens. That comes from KIRO 7 News, and I've got even more sources for that on my breaking news homepage. This I have, this one's called Uncharted Territory, Global De Facto Martial Law. It documents all the countries that are taking away our rights and freedoms. And so you can look at that there. Now here's the part that I want to, about the global takeover attempt. Possible. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's possible. Okay, publisher's note. That's me. Please notice how mainstream media virtually does not say a word about our rights and freedoms being taken away. After 30 plus years of research, it's my view the powers that be, which in a nutshell, just speaking generally here, the powers that be, the military-industrial complex, the multinational corporations, and the bankers, with the help of mainstream media, have entered stage 1 of the global takeover attempt of all civilians on the planet. And then I've got Aldous Huxley spoke about this in 1958, and there's a source where you can watch the video. Okay, here's the second part to this. countries have been doing joint military exercises together for decades. The US, Russia, and China have done joint military exercises together. And we're talking about thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, over the years of joint military exercises. Why do you think they're doing that, folks? And why do you think they've been doing it for decades? We're talking, some of them are 26 nations doing joint military exercises together. And I'll take to, before I take you to that and show you the US, Russia, China military exercises, let me go to the second very important part of this broadcast. This is from the Atlantic. America knew a pandemic was coming and did nothing. Now, this article says at least since 2012, they were told this is going to happen. And look, we're not prepared. It's spread all over the world. They've known, actually, way before that. The World Health Organization and the CDC have known for decades about this. Folks, we've had decades to prepare for this, but magically, they're not prepared. Isn't that interesting? And here's my note, publisher's note. It is my view this pandemic was intentional. It's not a coincidence. It's not just a random series of events that happen to happen. You can take that for what it's worth, but just please keep it in the back of your mind, because with all the information I've given you, you certainly can't say it's not a possibility of what I'm talking about is true. Okay, let me go to the joint military exercises. US, Russia, and China in joint military exercises together. Isn't that interesting that mainstream media has not told you about this? Isn't that interesting? Are you starting to see what's going on here, folks? Here's the first one. Let me see if I can get it closer for you. China invited to observe U.S. joint military exercises. They were invited in to observe. Here's a 26-nation joint military exercise. Right here is 63 pages of joint military exercises involving the United States. 63 pages. Why do you think they're doing that? Exercises together, other than spending tons and tons of money. The military-industrial complex. Right here, the U.S. and China carry out joint military drills. Now, you can read this article, go to important news in the menu of my website, and you will see the joint military exercises. Next one up, U.S. and Russian troops trained together. Isn't that interesting that mainstream TV has not told you about that? Russia and China in military exercises. Now, mainstream media will tell you about this one, but not the other ones. Mainstream media is beyond treasonous in what's going on here, folks. Beyond treasonous. Not saying a word about civilians losing their rights and freedoms, completely siding with the authorities and government. Chinese military joining Russians for nuclear war games. This one is American soldiers in a Russian military parade in Moscow. This more Russian-China exercises. And then this is just my personal view here. I'm wondering if the Somali pirates is not a smoke screen for U.S. and China and U.S. Russia for doing exercises. In other words, I'm saying what they're not telling anybody what they're doing. And the government has a long history of doing that, of withholding things from the public, and they let them leak out 30 years later. That's Americans and Russians training against the Somali pirates. China Navy fights pirates at Gulf of Aden. And that's where the supposed pirates are at. How can the men in little boats overtake a huge tanker? It's beyond, it's beyond absurd. But they expect people to believe it, and some people do believe it. I'm not saying this is true, but it's my suspicion that this is where the U.S. and China are doing military exercises together under a smoke screen. Okay, let me just go back here. Make sure I've got everything that I wanted to tell you. I'll play you a little more of Aldous Huxley here in just a second. The guy who wrote Brave New World. In fact, I'll end the broadcast with this. I'll play as much as I can. I got copyright issues here, so I got to be careful. A global takeover. In 1958, Aldous Huxley said the same thing. 1958.
This is Aldous Huxley, a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. A searing social critic, Mr. Huxley, 27 years ago, wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us. We'll find out why in a moment.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here for just a second.
The Mike Wallace Interview, presented by the American Broadcasting Company in association with the Fund for the Republic, brings you a special television series discussing the problems of survival and freedom in America.
Good evening. I'm Mike Wallace. Tonight's guest, Aldous Huxley, is a man of letters, as disturbing as he is distinguished.
I don't know if this show ever broadcast on the air. Sometimes TV stations they'll record a broadcast, but they will never air it.
Born in England, now a resident of California, Mr. Huxley has written some of the most electric novels in social criticism of this century. He's just finished a series of essays called Enemies of Freedom, in which he outlines and defines some of the threats to our freedom in the United States. And Mr. Huxley, right off the bat, let me ask you this. As you see it, who and what are the enemies of freedom here in the United States?
Well, I don't think you can say who.
I'll play one more segment for you, and then if you want to watch the whole thing, it's 28 minutes long. It's on my homepage at 2 different locations.
Who in the United States? I don't think there are any sinister persons deliberately trying to rob people of their freedom. But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes to use.
I will disagree with them on that point. I think there are people. 5 presidents have warned us against this. 5 presidents have warned us against the invisible government, secret government, deep state. It has many names. The establishment. 5 presidents have warned us about this. This is on my website too, under important news. Okay, that's it for me, and I will talk to you soon.